Okay, here we go. This is part 3, Bible Prophecy Live, and we're going to get into the seal judgments, chapter 6, Revelation. Before I start on that, I want to show a little news item here, and I'm going to share my screen. I'll probably share it most of the time now. It seems to work out pretty well. This is on a site called Silver Doctors, and it's about Syria. And it says, I'm just going to read this most of this first paragraph says, the use of the term global elitist is incorrect. It should be Western elitist. They do not have any control over Russia, China, and that's why the next big thing will be a war by proxy in Syria that will likely lead to some form of an escalated conflict, possibly in the South China Sea and Ukraine. The reason that's significant is because it was, I think, the first hangout where I mentioned Damascus. There's a prophecy about Damascus being a heap of ruins, and that, of course, is in Syria. And near, the other Syrian city, Aleppo, is being bombed to smithereens by Russia. And so this could very well be one prophecy about to be fulfilled, because if World War III, so to speak, is going to start in Syria, perhaps, then Damascus will, of course, be involved in that. And so this is hot in the news right now. And so I thought I would share that, because there is a prophecy about that. I think it's Psalm 17. And then Psalm 83 was the one about all the nations around Israel plotting to wipe it off the map. So that's the hot spot right now, and there's a lot going on in Syria, so I just thought that was pertinent to bring up right now. I'm going to go into Revelation 6, and what I'm going to do is just to read through it first, because I'm probably going to want to stop and talk about a lot of things as we're going along, and I think it's going to be too hard to follow if I don't read it first and then go back and do that. And besides that, when I'm done with the seals, I don't know if I'll get any farther tonight, because there's some other things I want to jump back and look at, as partly as a reminder and partly just to refresh. I guess reminder that is the word I'm looking for. So hold on just 1 second. There's full screen.
Yeah, just because. Yeah, it's for some reason it's not
too
on
small?
the YouTube. Well, on the YouTube page, it's difficult to read. Last time it was presenting screen. So yes, okay.
I'll see if I can resize the screen. Let me know if this helps at all. I think if I make it smaller, I don't know which is going to work better. Is that readable?
It's still very difficult. Last time I think if you take our icons off the bottom, I think that'll give you the full screen like you did last time, because that seemed to be
icons off the bottom. I'm not quite sure what you mean. I'm trying to resize the window. That makes it smaller. I don't know if I can make it any. Oh, I think I'll just have to do that. How's that? Let me know if that's more readable.
That's better. That's better.
Okay, and I don't think I'm presenting to everyone. I need to do that too. That made it bigger just by itself. All right. Okay, there's the Greek. Now I want to read the. Now I have to reposition this because it got bigger. There we go. Last time we left off with there's a throne in heaven. Around the throne are 4 living creatures or animals or whatever you want to call them, 4 living beings of some sort, and then 24 elders. And they had asked, an angel that was showing the Apostle John around asked him, was showing him that only the Lamb was worthy to open the seven sealed scroll, which I speculate is the title deed to earth that Jesus bought back with his blood from Satan. So John was upset that no one could be found, and then the Lamb turned out to be the one that was able to open it. And so now we're about to start the judgments of God, the wrath of God. Some people don't think the wrath starts with the seals, but the Lamb is Jesus, and he is God, and so technically this is the wrath of God. Now, some people will nitpick and say, no, it isn't. So we're going to start out with just going to read it along, and then we'll talk about it some more in a little bit. 1 second here. I think they're saying I can hide the little boxes in the corner, but I think when I'm presenting, they're not there anyway. So that shouldn't be an issue, I don't think. That's only for the panel members, I'm pretty sure, because I'm looking at the watch page and I don't see the little blocks there. So anyway, if that becomes a problem, let me know again. I'm going to start reading here in chapter 6. And like I said, I'm going to just go through it. I'm going to go into, I think, the first verse of chapter 7, and then I'll go back through it. Okay, this is John speaking. I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 animals or creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." Suddenly there was a white horse, and just a little note here, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, here they are. And I heard one of the 4 animals say in a voice like thunder, "Come." Suddenly there was a white horse. Its rider held a bow and wore a victor's crown and went out conquering with the intent to keep on conquering. You can see I have footnotes here. I may jump down there because I think we might want to see that, even though I said I wouldn't interrupt too much, but there's a lot more to interrupt. So this is the quick version first. The color white in Revelation typically represents purity, can also symbolize indifference or peace. And it's possible that because the rider has a bow and no arrows, that it promises peace, but the intent is clearly conquest or war. When the Lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second animal say, "Come." And out came another horse, a fiery one. Its rider was given a large sword and granted the power to take peace from the earth so that people would slaughter each other. If this is a literal fire horse, it could symbolize that which consumes and destroys, whereas red symbolized death in ancient Greece. How this differs from the horses to come may be that it marks the beginning or act of slaughter, while the others mark the results of the slaughter. Okay, when the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third animal say, "Come." Suddenly there was a black horse whose rider held a pair of scales, and I heard a voice from the center of the 4 animals saying, "A day's ration of wheat for a day's wages, and 3 days' ration of barley for a day's wages, and don't damage the olive oil and wine." When the Lamb opened the 4th seal, I heard the 4th animal say, "Come." Suddenly there was a green horse whose rider was labeled Death, accompanied by Hades. Check the footnote. Green symbolized fear in ancient Greece, while in modern English culture, fear is symbolized by being pale. The rendering preference, that means the way I translated it here, is for the actual color and not its figurative meaning, since that is not clear. And as with the fiery red horse, we cannot know whether these were to be understood as natural horse colors, such as chestnut or pale mottled. They were given jurisdiction over a fourth of the earth to kill with the sword, with famine, with other causes, and with the wild animals of the earth. When the Lamb opened the 5th seal, so we're done with the horses here. Lamb opened the 5th seal, I saw at the base of the altar the souls of those who had been slaughtered on account of the word of God and the testimony they held. They shouted in a loud voice, "How long, holy and true master, until you judge the earth dwellers and avenge our blood?" Then each of them was given a white robe and told to be patient for a little longer for their fellow slaves, their brothers and sisters who were about to be killed as they were. I watched the Lamb open the 6th seal, and there was a great disturbance. The sun became black as goat hair cloth, and the whole moon became like blood. Then the stars fell from the sky to the earth, something like when a strong wind shakes a fig tree and causes it to cast its overripe figs. The sky recoiled as when a scroll is rolled up, and every mountain and island was shifted from its place. Then the kings of the earth, the great ones, the military commanders of thousands, the rich, the strong, the slave, and the free, all hid themselves in caves and in crevices in the mountains. And they're saying to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of the one sitting on the throne and from the fury of the Lamb. Fury is where we get the older word wrath, the wrath of the Lamb. Fury of the Lamb. For the day of their great fury has arrived, and who is able to stand? And one verse, let's see, do I want to read that yet or not? Oh yeah, I'm going to go into verse 8, or chapter 8, not just for chapter 7, because I was thinking, why would I stop in the middle of that? After this, there's that, remember I said after this before, and after these things, there's one of them. After this, I saw 4 messengers, and remember that's angels, standing on the 4 cardinal points of the earth, footnote, north, south, east, and west. This is clear from the context here in a second, holding back the 4 winds to keep them from blowing on the earth or sea or any trees. Then I saw another messenger ascending from the direction of the rising sun and possessing the seal of the living God. The messenger called out in a loud voice to the 4 other messengers who were given permission to harm the earth and sea, do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we seal the slaves of our God on their foreheads. I heard the number of the sealed ones, and it was 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel, 12,000 from each one. There's the list of tribes. It is slightly different than the Old Testament list. I'm not going to go into that. There's a lot of speculation here on why that is. So, but I'm going to save that for some other time, because that's too long of a rabbit hole that really doesn't tell you a whole lot about Bible prophecy. After these things, suddenly there was a crowd so large that no one can possibly count the number of people. They came from all the non-Judean tribes, people groups, and languages, and were standing before the throne and the Lamb. They were clothed in white robes and held palm branches in their hands. They shouted in a loud voice, "Salvation to our God sitting on the throne and to the Lamb." Then all the messengers standing around the throne, as well as the elders and the 4 animals, fell down on their faces before the throne and worshiped God. Truly, blessing, honor, wisdom, thanks, esteem, power, and strength belong to our God forever. Absolutely. Then one of the elders asked me, these who have been clothed in white robes, who are they and where did they come from? And I answered, sir, only you know. These are the people coming out of the great oppression or tribulation. He replied, they soaked and white their robes in the blood of the Lamb, and as a result they are before the throne of God. They offer divine service to him day and night in his temple, and the one sitting on the throne will shelter them personally. No longer will they go hungry, no longer will they thirst, no longer will the sun beat down on them with its heat. For the Lamb, the one in the center of the throne, will shepherd them and guide them to wells of water, and God will wipe every tear from their eyes. When the Lamb opened the 7th seal, it became silent in heaven for half an hour. Then I saw the 7 messengers standing before God, and they were given 7 trumpets. That's where I wanted to stop, is the first verse of chapter 8. Okay, so now I'm going to go back. There's a lot in there, and I'm going to go back, and we're going to pick through here. So we go back to the first verse of chapter 6. And I'll go into the Greek a little bit. I think this is where we left off with the elders before on the commentary. I will say this about the 4 animals. Their meaning is not given. They could represent the tribes of Judah the way they would arrange themselves around the tabernacle, and the tabernacle was the temporary temple that the Israelites carried around with them while they were wandering in the wilderness. And so these 4 attributes of the animals happen to match the 4 tribes that were nearest the tabernacle, north, south, east, and west. There's other Old Testament references, and it could indicate that the focus is on Israel rather than Christianity, which is post-church age. Let me skip here a little bit. Okay. The first seal, there's so many ways I could go with this. Let me check one other thing first. All right, I'm going to go back here and just look at it, and maybe I'll look at the other things. I'm not sure yet. 7 seals, and the first one is the white horse. The rider has a bow. That the Greek word for bow is toxon, and I've been in arguments with people about what the meaning of that bow is. Strong's Concordance out of the air pulls the meaning a simple piece of cloth. I have investigated that. I don't know where they get that meaning. It's not justified in any way. They just kind of assert it and don't really back it up with anything. It does in fact mean a weapon of war. It actually more means the more literal meaning is something bent that propels something else, which is what a bow does. A bow as in a bow and arrow. And so this is a weapon that the rider has, not what the rider wears, as if some people say he's wearing a sash, a bow that's an article of clothing. I don't agree with that. There's a lot of people just absolutely adamant that this is just a sash around the rider, but I don't see that at all. It's a weapon, but he has no arrows. And some people interpret that to mean that he's not waging all-out war, but kind of a hidden war or a conquest by peace. There is an Old Testament. I'm not sure if it is just Old Testament. There may be a New Testament reference that says, by peace he will destroy many. So it seems to be a stealthy conquest. And some people take the rider on the white horse to be symbolic of Jesus because he comes at the end of the tribulation on a white horse. But the problem here is that Jesus is the one ordering the horses to go out. He's the lamb. And this is the first seal. It's not when he comes back. It's, it's very early on before anything else is, this is the first set of judgments. So again, I don't see that this is that the rider on the white horse is Jesus. It's more likely the beast or Antichrist. The second one is all-out overt war. And let me check the footnote again here. Okay, I don't think I'll check after a couple of footnotes. Not that one yet. Whoops, that skipped up a little high. Okay, so all-out war. This could be referencing the Syrian war. It could be, that involved with Damascus at Psalm 17, Psalm 83. That could be where those fit in. Nobody's sure. But there is war going on here. And then the third seal is clearly economic disaster. When it says, when we're wondering what the symbolism of the black color is, it's telling you right here in the context. It takes you a whole day's wages to buy enough wheat and barley to make a loaf of bread. Don't damage the olive oil and the wine is more like the luxuries will be very, very rare. Things that we take for granted now will be very rare. The fourth seal, death and Hades, and a fourth of the world's population. You could take it either way, either a fourth of the world's population or a fourth of its landmass will be killed with sword, violence, military action, and other things that go along with that, including, and it's interesting, it says the wild animals of the earth. A war of that scale would probably destroy a lot of habitat. So not only the people, but the animals will be desperate too and be out of character, so to speak, looking for some way to get some food. Fifth seal, this implies but does not overtly state a mass hunt of anyone loyal to God or Jesus. And we're just seeing the aftermath of that, and they're at the base of the altar, and I think that kind of symbolizes that their blood has been poured out as an offering, and what they're asking for here is revenge. They're in heaven asking God to avenge their blood on the earth dwellers, and they are not reprimanded for wanting revenge. They deserve it, And they were given a white robe and told to be patient because the number of those who were to be killed as they were was not yet complete. So there has been, by this fifth seal, a lot of persecution going on. And this seems to be, doesn't seem to be, it literally is different than just being killed in war, because it says the reason they're killed is because of their testimony about God. The sixth seal, up to this point, everything has been fairly ordinary, although on a much bigger scale. There's always been war, there's always been famine, there's always been economic crashes, there's been all those things, but now it's about to go up a notch. Okay, the sun becomes black as goat hair cloth, that is to say, a very, very deep black, and the whole moon becomes like blood. These two things don't happen at the same time with a normal eclipse, which is why I have such issues with the so-called blood moon theories and people getting all up in arms about what is called a Shemitah year. I have a section in my prophecy book about that. It's under fads or something. I forget what I titled it, but at any rate, this is unprecedented. As much as we've had volcanoes and other cosmic disturbances in past, and some we're not so clear about because history, who knows what's really gone on in the past, a lot of it's been hidden. But this time, this will be unmistakably unprecedented. The doom that so many people have been begging for a long time. But not only does the sun turn black, but the moon becomes blood, and the stars fall from the sky to the earth. Now, that word for stars is aster. I think we went over that before, where we get astronomy. And the Bible doesn't differentiate between one bright spot in the sky and another besides their sun, moon, and stars. And some of the stars are wandering. That is to say, they don't hold a place like most of the stars do, and that's where we get the word planet. Planet comes from the Greek word meaning wanderer. So we don't know exactly what is meant by stars, whether it includes anything like meteors. We don't know. It doesn't say, and it's not that specific, and the context isn't helping us here. But whatever stars they are, they're falling to the earth. Now, if the stars are not as large and far away as we're told, this is not inconceivable at all. But whatever they are, they're falling to the earth's surface. And the way they fall is like as if a strong wind has shaken a fig tree and it drops its figs too early because of the wind. So these things are going to just kind of drop. It doesn't give the idea that they're being thrown as much as they're just suddenly falling, as if they were shaken out of a tree. Because of this, these unprecedented things, everything else was, people could expect on a smaller scale. But this is really frightening, and everybody from the greatest to the least is terrified. And it's interesting, it says that they hide in caves and crevices in the mountains. Maybe this is a reference to underground bunkers. At any rate, everybody wants to hide there all of a sudden. And they ask the mountains and rocks to fall on them and hide them from the face of the one on the throne and from the fury of the Lamb. And the great day of their fury or wrath has arrived, not is about to arrive, but is already here. So here we have a fairly direct statement that the wrath of God has already begun. And also, this is just the point at which people on Earth are aware of it, because, as I said, the other things were fairly explainable in naturalistic terms, but this one is not. And they know it's God. They know it's the wrath of God. They know that Jesus and God have finally come back to make things right again, and that there's going to be a lot of trouble, tribulation. And here we are. There we are by the sixth seal at the latest. And like I said, in my opinion, since this first seal was opened by Jesus and nothing happened without him opening a seal first, then he's causing everything from the first seal onward. Therefore, it's the wrath of God. That's my opinion. This is interesting about the four angels or messengers, whether it means cardinal points or whether it just means north, south, east, west wind directions, because it seems to have something to do with the winds. And that these angels are going to wreak havoc on the earth from every direction. But they have to wait. And they have to wait until the slaves or the people who have given themselves to God are sealed. And these are Jews. Whether they happen to be in Israel or not, it doesn't say. It just says that God knows who they are, and he picks 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes, and that's where we get 144,000. And there's been a lot of imaginative attempts to apply those to other groups of people, or to say that the other groups of people are really Jews. God knows. But the point is that they must be from the tribes of Israel. That's where the 144,000 comes from, no place else. I mean, there's no way you can weasel out of the context here that that's what this is very specifically pointing to. So they couldn't do it. These four angels can't do anything until this sealing takes place. And then after these things, there's a transition. John sees a huge crowd of people in heaven. And I've gone over the terminology before of non-Judean. These are the ethnos, the Gentiles. And they're from every branch of Gentiles you can think of, and they are before the throne and the Lamb. So this is why I'm saying they're in heaven. And then the messenger, the angel, one of the elders says, "You know who these people are," and John doesn't know. And he makes a very interesting statement. These are the people coming out of the Great Oppression. Now, by every theologian's reckoning, the Great Oppression or the Great Tribulation, by almost universal agreement, is the second half of those 7 years. Remember, we said that the Revelation maps to Daniel, and we know this. I haven't gone over that in detail, but we know this because the midpoint of Daniel's 70th week, that 7 years, is when the beast declares himself God. Well, when we reach that same point in Revelation, the same thing happens. Then we know that we're matching Daniel there, and that's the midpoint, when we're not even there yet. But that is when the Great Tribulation, or the time of Jacob's trouble — Jacob is Israel, remember — that's when that begins. But here we are in the seal judgments, and John is being told that this crowd of people already in heaven is coming out of the Great Tribulation. Now, that the Greek grammar there is specific, and I go into this in my commentary, saying that this is unmistakably talking about the place of origination, not necessarily the time. It's a present participle for grammarians out there, if there's 2 or 3 in the world somewhere. But what that means is it's just saying where they come from. It isn't necessarily saying that the Great Tribulation is already in progress. Now, there are people who believe that the seals take up the whole 7 years, and that the 7th seal contains the trumpets, and the trumpets contain the bowls. In a manner of speaking, I agree with that, and it's still a sequence, but I'm not particularly fond of the idea that the seals take the whole 7 years, because there's too many differences. Remember, I think I've mentioned before about it's not so much the similarities that matter, it's the differences. So there's too many differences between the seal judgments and the other judgments that would tell us that it's not spanning the whole 7 years. So wherever I think it's possible that these seals are between the rapture and the actual beginning of the tribulation, because as of yet we've had no indication that any 7-year agreement has been enforced, It could have happened, but it may also happen at that half hour of silence. I don't know. It doesn't tell us. But what it does say is that the people that are being identified at this particular seal, the sixth, are coming from the Great Tribulation. And they're Gentiles that have apparently died, although it doesn't say so. It doesn't say they were martyrs. They could be, it's either way. You really can't lean one way or the other on that one. At any rate, it says they soaked and whitened their robes in the blood of the Lamb. Maybe that indicates they were killed, but we can say that about all Christians. And normally you would think of that as a martyrdom, but the Christian teaching, the teaching of the New Testament, is that anyone who belongs to Jesus is covered by his blood. So that expression by itself doesn't tell us whether they died or not. At any rate, there they are, and they're serving God, and God wipes every tear from their eyes. So this is obviously a very happy situation for them, whatever they had to suffer to get there. And that's all the judgments of the seals, because the seventh one is really literally nothing happens. Now the trumpets come next, but even though we say that the trumpets are contained in the seventh seal, it really doesn't say so. It's just the next thing in the sequence. But all we know is that there's going to be a half hour of silence. What does that symbolize? We're not told. Maybe there's 6 months of rest, like it's a break between the seals and the actual tribulation. I don't know. I'm speculating. At any rate, then we're going to get into the trumpet judgments. And since this has only been half an hour, I probably will get more farther than this today, and I wasn't sure about that. But I want to go back a little bit and look at some matchups with some things Jesus said. But what I might do, even though it's only been half an hour, I might open up for questions for a little bit and then get into this, because there's some interesting parallels here, and some of it mentions the sun, moon, and stars. So that's why I wanted to do that. So Larry, or have you seen any questions? I haven't really looked at the chat. You can unmute if you need to say anything. I'll look back. Okay, I think I've got all the way back to the first comments there. Don't see anything yet. Okay, I really don't see any questions. All right. I will go on with this then. What we have here is from my prophecy book, and it's the chapter called The Sealed Prophecies. I'm going to go also into the unsealed prophecies, because there's a lot of interesting stuff there. All right, so Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called the synoptic gospels because they have a lot of similarities, all about many of the same events. They have different emphasis. The Gospel of John is different, as it's more of a personal narrative, but still has a lot of details for timing that the other ones don't have. So that's kind of surprising. But at any rate, when it comes to prophecy, we're looking at Matthew, Mark, and Luke as far as the end times go. John really doesn't cover that. But there's a lot of similarities, but there's some key differences in Luke. Notice here in Matthew and Mark, where Jesus is asked about the end times. And I'm going to, hold on, sorry about that. I'm going to see where okay, I'm going to stop and do this one first. The unsealed, meaning sealed. Daniel was told to seal the prophecies. Revelation is to reveal, to unseal, to unveil. So Jesus is telling them what's going to happen. And let me give some context of when he's saying these things, and then it would make more sense to go over what he said in the Gospels. Jesus made a public statement about the end times, and then he made a private statement. The private one is much longer. In the public statement, they were all walking around in the temple compound and showing Jesus the buildings and saying how magnificent they were. And Jesus responded in a way that shocked them, and he said that these buildings would be torn down to the point where not one block rested on another. And this is what Titus, the Roman ruler Titus, did in AD 70. And so this is all that Jesus said publicly. Okay. It is possible that the prophecy about the people of Judea fleeing when they would see Jerusalem surrounded by encampments was at least partially fulfilled at that time, though it was largely only the Christians who escaped. I did some research on that, and because of what Jesus said, it was only the Christians who were paying attention to this, and so they got out before the siege, whereas the Jews did not. And the place they went to was not in the mountains, because Jesus is going to tell the people of Judea to flee to the mountains, but the Christians did not go to the mountains. So that's why I say it's only possibly a partial fulfillment. We should also note that Titus did not set up any idol in the temple, nor go into it and declare himself God. So he did not fulfill the abomination of desolation. I think I went over that before. All he did was fulfill one specific part of the prophecies Jesus talks about, and we'll get right into that. The private teaching was on the Mount of Olives. They call it the Olivet Discourse, to Peter, James, John, and Andrew. This was kind of his inner circle. And they asked him these questions: when will these things happen? And all Jesus had said was about the temple being destroyed, but Jesus is going to tell them a lot more. When will these things happen? What is the sign of your arrival? And what is the sign of the end of the age? So he's going to give a very lengthy response that gave them a lot more than they asked for. First, he says in Matthew 24, and that was one of the passages I'll go back to, where I look at all the pertinent points between the three gospels on this. He says he gives them signs for the kingdom of God, not the rapture. The church didn't even exist at this point, and he's talking to Jews before the cross. So he's not talking about Christians, he's talking about Jews and the kingdom of God that would have been ushered in with no interruption from the first 69 of the 70 weeks prophecy had the Jews accepted their Messiah. So he's still talking to them in those terms, and as I think I've mentioned before, after he rose from the dead in the early first chapter of Acts, the disciples ask him, are you going to do this right now? Are you going to set up the kingdom? He says no. So they didn't understand anything about a church or a rapture or anything like that at this point. So Jesus gives them signs to look for, okay? And here's the signs: false Christs and prophets, wars near and far, or rumors of wars, however you want to take that, famine, earthquakes, lawlessness, cold-bloodedness, the gospel of the kingdom proclaimed worldwide, Jerusalem surrounded. Remember, gospel means good news, and as of this point, when he's telling them this, he had not yet risen from the dead, so it's not that gospel. It's not that good news. It's the ones that the kingdom of God was near. Then Jerusalem would be surrounded. Then the abomination of desolation, the great tribulation, the sun and moon go dark. Moon turns red. Of course, I'm just summarizing here what I just mentioned there in one of the seals. Stars fall. Then the sign of the Son of Man. That doesn't mean that this happens bang, 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 one after the other. That's just a sequence Jesus is giving. The full details are what Revelation is about. This is not to the church here. This is to the Jews. Then the stars fall, the sign of the Son of Man appears in the sky, the Son of Man comes in the clouds. Remember, in the book of Acts, the disciples were standing on that mountain watching Jesus go off in the sky and was hidden by clouds, and the angel says, what are you doing standing here? He'll come back the way you saw him leave. So this is in this passage where Jesus is saying this is how he's going to come back. Then there's a trumpet blast for angels to gather the chosen people from all over the heavens. And it says the heavens. Then Jesus says, this generation will not pass before it all takes place. Debate rages over the meaning, but it will include the appearance of all these things, meaning the signs Jesus has just given to signal the arrival of the kingdom of God. And since these things did not happen in the first century, this generation cannot refer to the one of Jesus' day. Then the question is whether it refers to the whole nation of that time or to the lifespan of people born then. Even if it is the latter, we cannot say with any certainty what the length of that generation may be or exactly when the signs begin to appear. Thus, date setting is futile. It would be reasonable to take it to mean that the day of the Lord will not span a generation. In fact, we know from Daniel that it will last 7 years. So I take it to mean that when Jesus says this generation will not pass away, he's talking about the generation that sees all these things. That's the nearest Occam's razor, simplest contextual meaning you can get from it. Then he says, no one knows the day or hour for the arrival of the kingdom of God. He's still talking about the kingdom of God to the Jews before the cross. But the point is that if we Christians see these things, the shadows of these things overtaking us, then we know our departure is even closer. And he says, like the days of Noah. But what he says is, in the days of the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage up to the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing about what would happen. So, in other words, he's saying it's going to catch people by surprise. Most people, not the ones who are looking. It obviously didn't catch Noah by surprise here. But even though they were told what was going to happen, they didn't care. They didn't pay attention, just like a lot of people today. And so this will be a big surprise to them. That's what he's saying. It's like the days of Noah. Now, there's a lot of speculation about other things concerning the days of Noah, which involve the fallen angels monkeying with the human genome. And we know that's going on today. There's a lot of genetic manipulation going on. And so it could mean that, but you can't demand it from the context here. Because Jesus is saying exactly how it's like the days of Noah. He's saying people were going about their lives. And that's another thing, is this starts at a time before there's a major disaster. You know, the disasters are part of the judgments, not before them. So I'm not expecting anything major, world encompassing before the seals open. He also says it's like the days of Lot. Lot was the nephew of Abraham, and he lived in Sodom. And angel was sent to get him out of there so God could destroy the place. And he didn't want to leave. And so finally the angel just grabs him by the hand, him and his family, and yanks them out of there. That's kind of a snatch, you could say, like almost like a rapture thing. It's like, you know, the people don't want to go, but God says, okay, time's up. You're going. You don't have anything to say about it. So here again, it's by surprise, and it's at the very last minute. Then Jesus says, there's two contexts in which he says, you may have heard the phrase, one will be taken and the other left. You know, two people will be grinding at a mill, one taken, the other left. In the context here, it applies to when the people of Judea flee upon seeing the abomination of desolation. That is to say, the temple is desecrated and the beast or Antichrist declares himself God. And so when they see that, they're supposed to drop everything and run. So these are the people who are supposed to go. Okay? He's talking about the Great Tribulation, the abomination of desolation. There is another context where he talks about taking left, but right here in this one, he's tying it in with Lot and Noah and the people of Judea. So those are the ones who are supposed to run when they see this abomination. And because Jesus is giving circumstances, not a calendar date. So he says, watch for the circumstances. Keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. If the owner of the house had known what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and not let his house be broken into. So Jesus is saying, very obviously there, the reason you have to watch is because you don't know the time. You know he's coming, so you're not caught off guard. But the way you're not caught off guard is not because you know when he's coming, but because you know what the signs are and that you kept watch. And he tells it, he says it 3 times in that the parallel passages. Yes, they're all quoting the same thing, but they quote a little different parts of it. But it's unmistakable. In all 3 of these, he's saying, watch. He says something very interesting here in Luke as well. Pray that you may be able to escape all that is about to happen, that you may be able to stand before the Son of Man. Escape seems to be a dirty word among prophecy students a lot of times. They think, oh, you're a coward if you want to escape. Well, first of all, I think anybody who doesn't want to escape is loony, because this is extremely bad stuff. Jesus said it would be like, nothing that ever happened before will happen again. But he says, pray that you may be able to escape, that you can stand before the Son of Man. So he's saying escape is a good thing. So he's telling you to watch so that you can escape. He's not saying stay here and be a hero. He's saying, that we've already seen that a lot of people have already been martyred by the seal judgments. But this is very clearly a warning before anything happens, that he's saying you can't escape if you're watching. Let's see, I thought I showed this one already. Oh, he's talking about pray that your flight, not meaning a flight on a plane, of course, but fleeing when you see the abomination will not take place in winter on a Sabbath. That wouldn't matter to anybody who wasn't a practicing Jew, because travel on the Sabbath was very restricted. You weren't supposed to do it for more. I think by the time of Christ, the rabbis had stretched it to you don't go in more than a mile. And they had ingenious ways of trying to get around that on a technicality, being the kind of people they were, where they would extend their house, within just under a mile, they would put a little shack or something so they could go there. And then they would put another shack another mile so they could go there and say they never walked more than a mile. So, you know how people like that are. But anyway, the fact that Jesus says, you pray that it doesn't take place on a Sabbath, he's talking to Jews. And there's that passage again about praying to escape. And he says it's going to happen when least expected. People are always trying to predict it, but Jesus says it's going to happen when you don't expect him. This passage that's popped up here is where Jesus gives this parable about a master or a household owner that went away for a long time and put his servants in charge. And when he returns, he expects to find them doing their assignments. And so anyone who tries to accuse us of being lazy or sitting on our hands and doing nothing just because we're waiting for Jesus hasn't read the Bible. Because Jesus says, I expect you to be busy, not to sit around staring at the sky. Not to say you shouldn't watch, because he just got done telling us to watch in no uncertain terms. But he's saying, while you watch, you got things to do. And I better find you doing them when I come back, because you don't know when I'm coming back. And so here again, if people try to set dates, that doesn't match what the scriptures are saying. The scriptures say, here's the signs of the context and the of what to look for, but he doesn't give you a calendar date or a year or anything like that. The same parable, another passage. There are 2 possible ways for not expecting something. One is presuming it will not come in our day, and the other is losing hope. So if someone would say you don't expect Jesus to come, it's either you've lost hope and don't believe it anymore, or you just think, oh, it's always somewhere in the future, always somewhere in the future. A lot of people are like that. They think nothing is ever going to happen in their lifetime. I don't know why they think that. It's going to happen in somebody's lifetime. And by these signs, we've got to be pretty close. I mentioned about the parable of the 10 virgins the other day, that Jesus was still talking to Jews before the cross. There was no church at that time. And he's talking about people of Israel who either were watching or not watching or paying attention and being prepared for their Messiah. And the church is only ever portrayed as the bride of Christ and not one of the bridesmaids, which is what these virgins were. They were waiting for the groom, so they were like the bridesmaids because they're waiting for the groom to come to the bride's house. So they were not mapped to the church. And then he talks about good and bad servants, and where he's telling again about how he better find you busy when he comes back. Now here in this part of my prophecy book, I start to try to match up the statements that Jesus made in the Gospels with places in Revelation. So I'm trying to tie these in, because what Jesus said, again, he said to Jews, the Revelation is a much more complete, detailed account than either what Jesus said here, because Jesus is giving the revelation too, so it's all what Jesus said, but to the pre-church disciples, he's not giving as much detail. He's giving the sequence, so you can't say that because B follows A, that B comes immediately after A. There may be a lot of other things that happen between those two. So here again, and I'm not going to go into this other stuff right now because we haven't covered the trumpets yet. Here's where the false Christ in the Gospels match up with Revelation 6, which we read tonight. We have, here's the references. I'm not going to read them all. This is from my prophecy book, and I believe I already put the link in the description there. Wars and uprisings, famines, plagues, earthquakes, the black sun, red moon, and stars from the sky. What Jesus talked about in those passages in Matthew and Mark is a reference to the Old Testament book of Joel, where Joel says, I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Now, everybody, no matter what prophecy view, a futurist view you take, believes that the day of the Lord is the great tribulation, the second half of Daniel's 70th week. And so Jesus is saying these signs are before, but in another passage he says they're after. So all we can take to mean from that is not a contradiction, it's that they happen both times. It can happen twice. The abomination has happened once in the past, it will happen in the future. So there's no reason why we can't say that if certain things happen before, or happen before something and then they are said later to happen after, that they can't happen twice. So that's in Joel, and it's interesting that in Acts, when the church was born, Peter stood up and spoke to the crowd, and he quoted this passage in Joel about the sons and daughters prophesying, and yet this part of it did not happen at that time. So we know if it was a fulfillment, it was only a partial one. So let me go back to where I was, the sealed prophecies, and now we're going to look and match up these three passages of what Jesus was saying about the end times. Okay, he says in Matthew, gospel of the kingdom, here again, not the gospel of Jesus' resurrection, but gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then with the end will come. When you see the abomination of desolation is declared through the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, and here we see that same thing in Mark, but it's a little different in Luke. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by military encampments, that is going to happen in the future, but it also happened in 70 AD. So we have, when you see the abomination and all, or when you see the encampments, then those in Judea must run away into the mountains. Same thing in Mark, same thing in Luke. So there's all three of them matching up the exact same thing, but Luke is preceded by a slightly different statement. I'm just pointing that out. After that will be Great Oppression. This is where people establish the teaching that the Great Tribulation is the second half, because they've seen the abomination, which Daniel said was halfway through the 7 years. So after that, after the abomination, the likes of which have never happened from the beginning of the world until now, nor will ever happen again. In fact, if those days, which days? the second half of the tribulation, if those days had not been cut short, all flesh would have been wiped out, but they will be shortened for the sake of the chosen people. Okay, so Jesus is saying clearly that the worst of the worst is the second half of the tribulation, and it happens when they when the people in Judea see the abomination, and they're supposed to run away before this happens. Because what happens after, as it's laid out in the Old Testament, is that Jerusalem will be ransacked, and terrible things will happen to the people who didn't run away. So this is what he's saying here in Matthew. Same thing in Mark. And then down here in Luke, terrible stress upon the whole world and great rage against this people. So this is why it's called also in the Old Testament the time of Jacob's trouble, specifically for the people of Israel. They're being punished and purified. So, and the emphasis is so clearly on the Jews, it's not on the church. So there will be terrible stress in the world, rage against this people. They will be killed in battle, taken captive to all the other nations. Then Jerusalem will be trampled on by the nations until their time is up. You could take that two ways. Some people would take that as what has happened since AD 70, where the people were scattered through all the nations, and that the land of Israel has been trampled on by the Gentiles all this time. And there's no reason it can't mean both. Not necessarily one or the other, but it will also be future. Then there will be, this is in addition to the other two passages. The other two stop with the Great Tribulation and the days being cut short. In Luke, he goes on, there will be then there will be signs in the sun. So remember, Joel said before the great day of the Lord? This is then, this is after the Great Tribulation. There will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and on the earth the nation. This is interesting. In the earth, the nations will be filled with anguish and perplexity due to the roaring and turbulence of the sea. People will be definitely afraid. This is where you get the old Middle English King James statement, men's hearts will fail them for fear. That's what this is from this passage. And it says it's because of the roaring and turbulence of the sea, because the forces of the heavens will be shaken. You can speculate all over the place about what is causing this, but I don't think it's your average tsunami. I think it's going to be all the oceans sloshing around like you're shaking a fishbowl. Okay? And this will make everybody absolutely terrified. So he's saying, after the trampling of Jerusalem, this will happen. And then, after this happens, they will see the human, which in my translation is how I render the Son of Man, coming in a cloud with great power and majesty. But when you see all this coming to pass, stand up and raise your heads, for you are about to be rescued. So Jesus is saying to the Jews, when you see all this terrible stuff happening, and then you see the Messiah coming, don't lose heart, you're about to be rescued. So, and here I go into a discussion a little bit about, similarities and differences in those passages as far as what happened in the past and what could still happen. There's much Gentile control over Jerusalem, and the Israelis are not allowed to build their temple in its ancient location. And there's been lots of war and national disasters in the last 2,000 years, but nobody desecrated the temple in 70 AD, as I mentioned just a while ago. It was burned and dismantled by the armies of Titus, and he did not set any idol in it. That's what Jesus was talking about when he said, not one stone will be left upon another. There was gold in the temple, and the soldiers had set it on fire, and the gold melted and ran into the cracks between the stones. And so the soldiers tore the place apart to get the gold out. That's why that fulfilled what Jesus said would happen. The people of Judea did not flee to the mountains when they saw Jerusalem surrounded. There's no record of any such mass exodus. Was the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem sudden, as per these passages? Clearly not. The siege took quite a while, and I have a footnote here describing the siege. Nero was the Roman emperor at the time, and some say that he was the Antichrist and he fulfilled the prophecies, but he did not die as specified in these passages, which says that Jesus kills him. The Lord Jesus will overthrow him, but Nero committed suicide. And neither he nor any of his associates caused everyone in the world, even if it was, you take world as limited to the Roman Empire, to take a mark on their forehead or right hand and forbid commerce without it. So these are differences. Did Jesus return in the clouds with all the signs in the sky? And of course not. It should have happened right after the destruction of Jerusalem if the preterist view was true, but it didn't. And so they say, it happened, but you couldn't see it. That's a cop-out. That's not an answer. It's a cop-out. So here again, this is a problem with allegorizing things that you don't have any right to allegorize by the context. So some things were fulfilled in 70 AD and some were not. But because some of it was fulfilled doesn't mean that stuff won't happen again, because as I've said, the abomination happened before. So any of these prophecies can happen again, even if they were partially fulfilled in the past. Then I go into more about Daniel here. I don't want to do that right now. And go back to here. So let me look at my commentary here for a bit, and then I think I will take a little break. And I think I went over a lot of this. Here's where I talked about toxon, or toxone, depending on how you want to pronounce it. It's a weapon of war. The crown on this rider, I forgot to mention that. If this were Jesus, it would be a diadem, a crown of royalty, but it is not. It's the Stephanos, the crown of conquest. That's another difference. So this is not Christ and his followers. And here I just go into why I don't believe in historicism and all that. It's interesting, the word green in Greek is chloros, which is where we get our, you can think of other words that like chlorophyll, chlorine, kind of greenish. The martyrs at the altar, I talked about that. And this is where I go into more detail about the crowd that no one could number coming out of the Great Tribulation, and I give the grammatical information there. So here I had a little bit of deductive reasoning, which depends on certain things that I mentioned before. The congregation, the church, does not go through the Great Tribulation at the very least, because no one can dispute that that's the wrath of God, although the post-trib people do. The origin of these people was the Great Tribulation, even though they're mentioned in the seals. And because of this, they're not the church, even though they're Gentiles, because the church, as Paul describes it, the church is neither Jew nor Gentile, Galatians 3:28. And then there's another passage where he says that there's Jews, Greeks, another word for Gentiles, Jews, Greeks, and the church of God. The church is a new creation, he calls it as well. So it's neither Jew nor Gentile. Since these are called people from the nations, then they're not the church, and they come out of the Great Tribulation, which the church is not to suffer. So whoever those people are, or however they got there in heaven, they're not the church. So, in my opinion, the sixth seal is the outside limit for the rapture, in which case all the remaining judgments happen afterwards. As for the inside limit, where it precedes the first seal, there's no reason why it can't, even if the wrath of God doesn't technically begin until the sixth seal, but I believe it can, as I explained earlier. Let's see, I'm not going to go into that right now. Let's see. I talked about the 144,000. Now, I will go in. I do mention here that throughout Revelation, there's going to be some flashbacks, some side notes. Some things are clearly things that happened in the past, or at least they make a reference to things that happened in the past. But they're given at various times as a kind of a interruption or a pause in the sequence of judgments. And you have to really pay attention to that, and we'll try to do that as we go along. Even if, and I go into various theories, I'm not going to do that right now, of how people try to cram all the judgments into the final 3.5 years or the final day of the 7 years. But there are other reasons why we can't do that, and we will meet the famous 2 witnesses later on. That's at the 6th trumpet. Now I talk here in the commentary, I talked about the half hour of silence. And that half hour is not repeated in any of the other sets of 7 judgments. That doesn't happen at the 7th trumpet, doesn't happen at the 7th bowl. There's something different about the seals. This half hour of silence seems to set it apart from the other judgments. This is why I'm thinking maybe at this point is where the actual 7-year treaty is enforced. I'm just speculating, but there's something different about it. I'm just saying the seals are set apart from the trumpets and bowls in some way, even though they're all sets of 7, and there's 3 sets of 7, which really is a kind of an emphasized symbol of completeness. And we'll see that statement in Revelation where people and entities in heaven are saying, with this now the judgments of God are complete. And so there is just something about that half hour of silence that I wish they would have said more, but if we were supposed to know, we would have. And at this point, I don't think I read that far, where John sees an angel puts a censer, which holds incense, on the altar in heaven. That it says it contains the prayers of the holy people, but then the angel fills it with fire, coals from the altar, and hurls it onto the earth. As if the prayers were for vengeance, maybe. I don't know. I'm just speculating there. So at that point, we're ready to get into the trumpets. And I'm at least going to take a break here. It's only been about an hour. So I might take a break. And if you guys want, I will get into the trumpets. Otherwise, right now, I'm going to take a little break, open up the mic if you guys want on, and if even if nobody in the chat has a question, maybe you guys do here on the panel, and you'll have to unmute yourself. I can't do that for you. Yo, panel members, you there? They must be busy. Okay. Victoria mentioned someone called Anthony Patch and the Bottomless Pit. I'm not familiar with him. I'll have to do that sometime. But I do think that CERN may be an attempt to open the abyss. There seems to be a lot of other people not having any interest in the Bible prophecy who have said similar things, where they believe they're trying to open an interdimensional portal. And there's been strange statements and rituals and things concerning the opening of CERN that seem to indicate that there's some kind of supernatural or other dimensional shenanigans going on with CERN. So it could be. I mean, we know when we go through Revelation, they will not be able to open the abyss if that's what they're trying to do. They won't be able to open it without God giving them the key. So we'll have to see. We'll just have to wait and see. And like Jesus said, pray to escape. You don't want to be here to see it. So I don't see. Let me look around for any more questions. Okay. Apparently this person, as Victoria says, does think it has to do with CERN. So I'm not the only one who thinks that. Panel members, you want to say anything right now? Alrighty, I don't know where you guys are, but I could use a break here in a minute if you guys want to show up. Even if I get started let me know when you're back, and I will take a couple of minutes. Otherwise, nobody's around, I will keep going. Okay, chapter 8 is when we start looking at the trumpet judgments. Oh, okay, I did get just slightly ahead of myself. This is where he sees the angels about to sound the 7 trumpets, and before they start, though, he sees this angel get the censer and do what I just mentioned before. And what happened was when he hurled it down to the earth, that it caused thunder, rumbling, lightning, and an earthquake. So, chapter 8, verse 7, the first trumpet sounds, and this time you notice that there's no, even since after the 4 horsemen, there has been nobody saying, come first. It only did that for the 4 horsemen. So there's another difference between that and all the other judgments. The first 4 seals are different from all the rest. The first trumpet sounds, and there's hail and fire mingled with blood thrown to the earth, and a third of the earth, a third of the trees, and all the green grass is burned up. That has not happened in the past. And whether it means a third of the earth by land area, you would assume, since it's talking about the earth instead of the people. So this is an attack, a judgment on the earth. And people will object to, what has the earth done? Well, if you go way back to Genesis, the ground was cursed because Adam was taken from it. Whether you think God should have done that or not, I wouldn't advise second-guessing your creator and all that, but that's a whole different topic. At any rate, the earth is being destroyed. And later in Revelation, we'll see entities in heaven saying that God is justified in doing these things to destroy those who destroy the earth. So God is kind of saying, you don't like the earth I made, you're going to monkey with it. Okay, fine, I'll push you over the edge in that regard. At any rate, the proportions in the trumpet judgments are 1/3, whereas in the seals they were 1/4. So there's another difference. So all the green grass is burned, and I don't think it just means the grass on your lawn. It means all sorts of grasses, and a third of the trees. So this is pretty severe, unprecedented, and it comes from the sky. Okay, so this is an angel hurling down all these things. The second trumpet sounded, and a huge blazing mountain was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea, there's that third again, became blood. A third of the sea creatures with souls died, and a third of the ships disintegrated. I looked into the Greek here, and it does say they kind of just disintegrated. That's the closest meaning I could find for that word. They weren't just destroyed, they were obliterated. So whatever this blazing mountain was, it could be some sort of meteor, but it was thrown into the sea. And sea creatures with souls. Back in Genesis, everything that is mammalian has the breath of life in it. So I'm guessing this is referring to sea mammals. So whatever it is that this thing is doing, it seems to affect the mammals, but not the fish. The third trumpet sounded, and a huge star burning like a torch fell out of the sky, landing on a third of the streams and springs. The star is called bitterness. This is wormwood, named after a bitter herb. So this is where wormwood happened. I've seen all kinds of theories about Nibiru being wormwood and all this and that. Here it is in context, and it's saying that this is a star burning like a torch, comes out of the sky and lands on the streams and springs. So it doesn't hit the ocean, but it poisons a third of them. And people die from drinking it. Some kind of, whatever it does, it contaminates the water. Fourth trumpet. Here's our thirds again. A third of the sun, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars were struck with darkness, such that the light of both day and night was reduced by a third. Some people will say this is the shortening of the days, but I don't think we're at that point yet, because we haven't yet seen the abomination of desolation, so we can't be at the midpoint. And the Great Tribulation happens after that. So I don't think this is shortening of days, it's just shortening of light. So there will be more darkness and less daylight in each 24-hour period. Then, John says, I saw an eagle flying through the sky, and I heard it say in a loud voice, woe, woe, woe upon the earth dwellers, because of the trumpet blast about to be sounded by the remaining 3 messengers. Okay, so if it hasn't been bad enough already, it seems like God is slowly stepping up the judgments. He starts off with things that are bad enough to get your attention, but not bad enough to make a lot of people repent yet. So he's saying now it's going to step up. Some really bad stuff has happened by fourths and then thirds, and now it's going to get a lot worse. And we're still not even near the end yet. The 5th trumpet sounded, and I saw, John says, a star that had fallen out of the sky, and he was given the keys to the shaft of the abyss. Okay? This is where God gives the keys. And as he gives it to a star fallen out of the sky, could be a reference to Lucifer or Satan, given the keys to the abyss. Let me go down, bottomless pit. I won't jump down again to this one. The leader of the creatures that are coming out of the abyss, it's called Abaddon and Apollyon, and they both mean destroyer. When the fallen star, opened the shaft, smoke went up from it like the smoke of a huge furnace, darkening the sun and the air. Out of the smoke to the earth came locusts, and they were given permission like that of the earth's scorpions. Now we're going to see what the locusts do and then what they look like. Okay, so the locusts were told not to harm the pastures of the earth, nor anything green, nor any of the trees, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. So anybody who wasn't sealed, whether that only means the 144,000 Jews, or whether there were others sealed that we weren't told about, I don't know. But if you don't have the seal of God, you're going to be in a world of hurt. And the locust things, were not allowed to kill them, but only to torture them for 5 months. The torture was like the agony of a scorpion sting, and in those days, people will seek death but not find it. They will want to die, but death will elude them. Nasty stuff for 5 months. The locusts resembled horses prepared for battle. On their heads, you can take this literally or figuratively, it doesn't really say, but these are unusual creatures if they're living things. On their heads, they had what looked like golden victor's crowns, and they had faces like humans. Their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth were like lion's teeth. These could also be chimeras or genetically modified creatures of some sort. They wore body armor that seemed to be made of iron. Seemed to be, so who knows what that is. And the sound of their wings was like many horses and chariots running into battle. So John is trying to describe this thing in terms of stuff he could relate to. The locusts had tails with stingers like scorpions, and the tails were allowed to harm people for 5 months. They had as king over them the messenger or angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon and in Greek Apollyon. So this is destroyer, this is the devil, this is Satan. Some people say that Apollyon is a reference to Apollo. Some strongly disagree with that. I can't think of the guy's name who has several books out. He had one called Apollyon Rising, where he believes that this is Apollo, that Apollo was a representation of Satan. So this was the first woe of the 3. And this is really, really bad. So this first woe is gone, but look, there are still 2 more to come after these things. There's that phrase again. Okay. The 6th trumpet sounded, and I heard a voice coming from the 4 projections on the golden altar before God. It told the 6th trumpeter, release the 4 messengers confined to the great river Euphrates. So the 4 messengers were released, having been prepared for this hour, day, month, and year to kill a third of mankind. The number of the cavalry troops was 200 million. I heard that number. This is where a lot of people, going back to the 70s at least, where Hal Lindsey, a famous prophecy writer, wrote his book, The Late Great Planet Earth. And whatever, he's got good and bad qualities and all that, and has been wrong about a lot of things, but at the very least, he woke a lot of people up to Bible prophecy, and I think he should be credited for that, if nothing else. He believes that this is a Chinese army. All it says the kings, plural, of the East, a little bit later, and that these were cavalry. They could be something like a mechanized army. They could be bots. They could be demons. We don't know. We just know that there's 200 million of them. Okay, and that these angels or messengers were released for this very purpose at this point in time. And then he describes them. He says, they had body armor that was fiery red, deep blue, and bright yellow. The horses' heads were like lions' heads, and out of their mouths go fire and smoke and sulfur. From these three disasters, the fire, smoke, and sulfur, a third of mankind was killed. The horses' license to kill, or authority, or jurisdiction, is the closer to the meaning in the Greek, is in their mouths and tails, because their tails are like serpents who inflict injury with their heads. So these are nasty, nasty things that the second woe was describing. The rest of mankind who were not killed in these three disasters refused to change their minds. This is where we get to, that phrase means repent. Refused to change their minds from what they had done. They did not stop worshiping demons and idols of gold, silver, copper, stone, and wood, which cannot see or hear or walk around. Neither did they change their minds, repent, from their murders, their sorceries, their promiscuity, or their thefts. Sorceries could mean drug use. That's the word pharmakia, from which we get pharmacy. But in that culture, the drugs were used for sorcery. So it's impossible to say there whether it means they won't give up their drugs or whether they won't give up their witchcraft. Hard to say which, and that might not be a terribly big difference between the two. So, and it depends on the what people are doing these things for. And it does seem to be involved with, it's in this context with worshiping demons. So a lot of people do that, even today. People will think, oh, no, people, we're too sophisticated. No, we're going backwards. So no, anything is possible. At any rate, in spite of those three woes, people just still dug in their heels. And that was the sixth trumpet. So there's one more woe to go. Let's see, I want to make sure that I might get ahead of myself here. Nope, that's the second woe. Okay. So people wouldn't repent. Why? Who knows? But they just wouldn't. I'm going to look ahead here and see how far I want to get before, if I want to take a break or not. A lot going on here, and the two witnesses and things. I think I will take a break here and look at some questions. Is anybody on the panel back yet? I'm going to check some. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm back.
Where's Larry?
I don't know.
Something must have come up. All right. Have I missed any questions? Sorry?
I forgot to message you when I came back.
Oh, okay. Well, you may have, and I just didn't see it. Maybe, I don't know. At any rate, let me just take a look here in the public chat. And if you could mute for just a second, because we're getting that echo, at least I hear it. And then when I'm done with that, I can see if you got any questions yourself. All right, let me look back here. Let's see. Wade says he thinks CERN is reversing polarity of the Earth. Possible, who knows? Yes, Victoria says that God is going to make a new heaven and earth anyway. Yes, he is, and that's way at the end. But not to worry about what's happening to the earth during these judgments, because it will be redone. It will be restored. Sounds like NASA's rockets throwing into the sea. It's possible. There's all sorts of things up there in the sky that we may not know about that they keep in so-called satellites or whatnot. But these are at the instigation of God, so who can say? Victoria pointed out that 1/3 of the angels rebelled, so that's an interesting connection, because it may be that in making these things thirds, that God isn't just being merciful and not doing it all 100% instead of 33%, but that he's judging the fallen angels. That could very well be, because a lot of people say that the plagues of Egypt were each tailored to disrespect a particular Egyptian god. So that's entirely possible. Dick says the old name for the town where CERN is built was called Apolloniacum. I think I can't hardly see that, but yeah, I remember reading something similar now that you mentioned that. So that's interesting too. What about the Nephilim? I thought I mentioned that the other day, but in the other hangout, but the way some of these angels are described, the fallen angels are not the Nephilim. The Nephilim are their hybrid offspring, human angel offspring. And those could be involved here, or they could be the things coming out of the abyss. We just don't know. Can't be real specific on that one. Mark of the Beast. No, we haven't got there yet, but we will. I think that's coming up in the last trumpet, if I'm not mistaken. There might be. It's either at that or just after it. As for the Masons in 33, who knows? It could be a connection there. Okay, Stefan, did you have any questions so far, or do you want to,
No.
All right.
Sorry.
Let's see. Oh, no problem. Well, we're at the hour and a half mark. I might try to finish up the trumpets and then end it there, because I think we will at least get close to the Mark of the Beast part. But I think we will talk about the two witnesses. A lot of people are interested in that. Okay. People haven't repented. Then John sees another angel or messenger descending out of the sky. He had been clothed with a cloud, and there was a rainbow over his head. His face was like the sun, and his feet were like pillars of fire. In his right hand he held a little open scroll, and he placed his right foot on the sea and his left on the land. What the significance of that is, some people say that the sea represents the Gentiles, the land represents the Jews. There's precedent for that in Bible study, theology. What that signifies, it's not really clear. It doesn't tell us. But he has a little scroll in his hand, and he calls out in a loud voice like the roar of a lion, and the seven thunders, whatever that, responded. And when they did, John says, I intended to write it down, but I heard a voice from the sky saying, seal up what the seven thunders said and do not write it down. Sky, most translations will translate that heaven. It could be either, because it's the same word in Greek, Uranos, which is where they get the name of that, the planet name that people like to joke about, Uranus. But there's Uranos in Greek. I like that pronunciation better. And I believe it's the something to do with Zeus or something like that. I can't remember. I'm drawing a blank on that right now. But at any rate, it's also the word for sky or heaven. Okay, so evidently they named sky or heaven after the abode of the gods or something like that. But that is, you can take it either way, and the context doesn't always help you. And like right here, you don't know if it's from heaven, from the sky. Of course, voices are going to come from the sky, but from your perspective on Earth, you wouldn't know how high up in the sky is it in God's abode or just the atmosphere. You can't be more specific than that. But at any rate, he hears this voice that tells him not to write down something, and then he goes back to the angel or messenger that was standing on the sea. This messenger lifted his right hand to the sky, and swore an oath to the eternal living one, which is God, who formed the sky, the earth, the sea, and all they contain, that there will be no more delay. And the day that the seventh messenger sounds the trumpet, the secret of God will be completed, which is the gospel he announced to his slaves, the prophets. So here again, we're seeing what I mentioned a little bit ago about completion, and with these 3 sets of 7. And from time to time, you'll see people saying, now it's done, now it's done, now it's done. But things go on, and then they say, now it's done again, because now is this day of the Lord. So don't take it as this point in time, but this section of time. So anyway, the 7th trumpet is really significant. It's like the deed is done, and then there's one set of 7 judgments remaining. But we haven't quite got there yet. The voice John had heard from the sky spoke to him again and said, go and take the open scroll from the hand of the messenger standing on the sea and the land. So he asked for the scroll, and the messenger says, take and eat it. It will upset your belly, but taste as sweet as honey in your mouth. So he took the scroll, ate it, and it did exactly what he said. Then the angel said to him, you must prophesy again to people, groups, nations, languages, and many kings. What that all about? It could mean that though John is up in heaven seeing these things, he's going to have to go back. And he did, in fact, live to a ripe old age and did these things. So maybe that's a reference to him personally. I'm not sure. Nobody can say for sure. Then he says, I was given a stick like a measuring rod and was told, arise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those worshiping at it. So there's got to be a temple to measure. This is not the church with our bodies as the temple of the Holy Spirit, as it is described in the New Testament, the letters concerning the church, because you don't go out with a measuring rod and measure that. Nobody wants to see how tall you are. What he's saying here is there's a temple, and he's going to go measure the altar and those worshiping at it, but leave out the outer court and don't measure it, because it was given to the non-Judeans, that is the nations or Gentiles, who will trample the holy city for 42 months, 3.5 years. There's different ways, 1,290 days, 42 months, time times and half a time. These are all statements of half of 7 years, and different expressions for different groups of people, it seems. And I'd have to study that some more, but at any rate, the Gentiles will trample the city for 42 months. This is what I was talking about earlier, where Jerusalem will be overrun, and the people see the abomination. They're supposed to get out before that happens, and then the city, holy city as Jerusalem, gets trampled for 42 months. So the second half of the tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble, when any Jews with any half a brain in their head will have left, so that they don't suffer these things, but Jerusalem will be overrun. And this is where we meet the 2 witnesses. He says, I will give my 2 witnesses the charge of prophesying for 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth. So for the Gentiles, he's using 42 months. For the 2 witnesses, he's using 1,260 days. I said 1,290. I think they stopped 30 days short or something like that. But they're supposed to prophesy, and prophesying doesn't only mean talk about the future. It's any message from God. Okay, so this is still in the trumpet judgments here, and we will see that I believe these people, these 2 witnesses, actually started doing these things at the beginning, the first half of the tribulation, because they're going to be killed at the midpoint. So they have to have been around for 1,260 days in order to make that match. These witnesses, it goes on to describe, are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands set before the master of the earth. This is an Old Testament reference where there's a vision where a prophet is shown this scene in heaven, and he sees these 2 olive trees, also 2 lampstands, and they represent 2 witnesses. Okay, so these are not the church in Israel. These are not any random candidates that people want to substitute and say this is the 2 witnesses are here. No, they're not. Because in this context, it goes on to say, if anyone decides to harm them, fire goes out from their mouths and consumes their enemies. This is how whoever decides to harm them must die. This has not happened in the past, and this seems pretty literal from the context, so I take it as literally 2 human beings. speculation is that these are two, some say Moses and Elijah to represent the law and the prophets, but Moses died. The only two in the Old Testament, as I think I mentioned before in an earlier hangout, that never died physically were Enoch and Elijah. So it's possible it could be those two. We don't know. It's just possible. But here they are being referenced as two olive trees and lampstands set before God. So you have to wonder why Enoch and Elijah were taken alive. Is it because they would have to come back and finish something? It's quite possible. It's just an interesting theory. These two have permission to lock up the sky so it doesn't rain for as long as they prophesy, to turn the waters into blood, and to strike the earth with all kinds of disasters as often as they choose. And when they complete their testimony, the wild animal, which is the first time we see the word beast, I translated it literally from the Greek, wild animal. I'll use the term beast because that's more familiar and less controversial than Antichrist, believe it or not. But so when they complete their testimony after their 1,260 days, the beast descending out of the abyss will fight and conquer them and kill them. So in order for them to have been around for that long, that 3.5 years, and be killed by the beast that arises out of the abyss, then they must have been doing all this stuff all this time for the first half of the tribulation, the 3.5 years. So the beast kills them. He leaves their dead bodies in the main square of Jerusalem, which is described, I know it by the description, that city which is figuratively called Sodom and Egypt. That is, where their master was crucified, Jerusalem. So they will be prophesying in Jerusalem for the first half of the tribulation. No such thing has been going on yet in history, certainly not happening now. Somebody tried to dress up in a hood one time, I remember in the last year or so, at the Vatican, and people are going, is this one of the two witnesses? No, wrong place, wrong time. And the guy didn't do any miracles. So anyway, their dead bodies are left in the square of Jerusalem. People from every group and tribe and language among the nations, that is to say Gentiles, gawk at the corpses for 3.5 days. There's that 3.5 again, refusing them burial. The earth dwellers gloat over them and even send gifts to each other because these two prophets had tormented them. But after 3.5 days, the spirit of life from God entered into them, and they stood on their feet, and great fear fell upon those who watched. Then they heard a loud voice from the sky, or heaven, say to the two, "Come up here." And they ascended into the sky in a cloud while their enemies watched. In that very hour there was a great earthquake, and 1/10 of the city collapsed. 7,000 individuals were killed, and the survivors were gripped with fear and gave honor to the God of heaven. So finally the people are finally scared enough to actually repent. And that was just the second woe. So we got one more to go, the 7th trumpet. And it comes rapidly after, the third will come rapidly after the second. Then the 7th trumpet sounded, and there were loud voices in the sky or heaven saying, "The kingdom of the world now belongs to our master and his anointed, who will reign forever." That line, especially if you're familiar with the King James, is what Handel used in his piece, "The Messiah." You may have heard, especially at Christmas or Easter, the Hallelujah chorus. That's where that comes from, right out of Revelation. The kingdom of the world now has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, I think is the wording there. So then the 24 elders we met before, sitting on thrones before God, fell down on their faces and worshiped God. "We thank you, O Master God Almighty, who was, who is, and who was, because you have taken your great power and assumed your reign. The nations were angry and your rage came," or wrath, "and now is the time for the dead to be judged, to repay your slaves the prophets and the small and the great who fear your name, and to ruin those who ruin the earth." So those who are chemtrailing, genetically modifying, fracking, just ruining everything, God is going to destroy those who destroyed the earth. So there will be payback. And so now is the time for judgment. And what they're referring to is now, this is not the end of the tribulation. This is when the final judgments are going to begin, and the time of Jacob's trouble and all that, because we have yet to see, we have not in this text seen the abomination yet, but that's going to happen shortly. Then the temple of God in heaven was opened so that the Ark of the Covenant could be seen inside, and there came lightning, rumblings, thunder, an earthquake, and large hail. Ark of the Covenant, if you watched Indiana Jones, that part of it is actually somewhat accurate, where they depicted the box. An ark was any kind of container that was usually meant to be carried along, either by people or water. So technically the little basket that baby Moses was put into the Nile River was an ark. And of course Noah had an ark. Well, this is the Ark of the Covenant. It's a container that the Jews carried around while they were wandering in the wilderness. And inside was placed the walking stick or rod of Moses' brother Aaron that had sprouted leaves. It was one of the signs to Pharaoh, I think. Another was a jar of manna, the food that God sent down to Israel while they were wandering, because they were whining about having no bread to eat. And I'm trying to think of the third thing. I think it was a copy of the Ten Commandments. This is what's in the Ark of the Covenant. At any rate, this ark is said to be in heaven. The temple of God in heaven was open so that the Ark of the Covenant could be seen inside. And there came all these things. And then a great sign was seen in heaven. And this is one of some people have counted what they call 7 personages, 7, there's the beast and the false prophet, and there's this woman. There'd be another woman later, the woman who rides the beast. We're not going to get to that today, I don't think. So this is a great sign, okay? This is not part of the normal sequence of events. He's not saying after these things. He's saying, I'm seeing this vision here at this point, okay? And what he's seeing is a woman clothed with the sun, the moon beneath her feet, and a victor's crown of 12 stars on her head. This depiction is almost verbatim from the Old Testament, where one of the sons of Israel, Joseph, had these dreams, these prophetic dreams. And in one of those dreams, he pictured this very thing in a couple different ways, and that this was clearly a reference to Israel and what would happen to Israel, because the 12 stars signify the 12 tribes. And that this is a depiction that John is seeing at this time, and it says that she is pregnant and crying out because of the torture of labor pains as she is giving birth. So we're going to see a little bit of speculation about that. I'm going to read along here a little bit first. So this has something to do with Israel, and this is a vision, okay? She's giving birth. And then meanwhile, another sign was also seen in heaven. And look, a huge fiery dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, with each head wearing a royal crown. This is not this is the diadem, not the Stephanos. Its tail dragged a third of the stars of the sky and threw them onto the earth. This is clearly referencing Satan taking a third of the angels with him. It stood before the woman with the intention of consuming the child as soon as it was born. She gave birth to a male child who is to shepherd all the nations with a rod of iron. That very phrase is a direct Old Testament quote talking about the Messiah. So this is Israel producing the Messiah. Okay, some people say, especially the Catholic Church will say this is the Catholic Church and the 12 apostles and, and all these things, but or they say that the woman is Mary. But this is clearly referencing Israel, and Israel produced the Messiah, produced Jesus. And this Jesus is to rule the nations with a rod of iron, meaning zero tolerance for any kind of foul play. But her child was snatched up to God and his throne. Jesus went up in a cloud. And the woman, now here we don't necessarily have, this is a vision, so this is not an immediate thing that happened right after that. The woman fled into the desert. This is let me read this whole thing. The woman fled into the desert where there is a place prepared by God. There they will nourish her for 1,260 days. There's that number again. So this is the people of Judea they're about to see the abomination, and they're supposed to run away to a place in the desert prepared by God. I personally, and a lot of other people, believe that this is referencing the stone city of Petra. I'm pretty sure I mentioned that before. That they will be protected there, for that those who run, instead of staying to be ransacked by the Gentiles for 3.5 years, they will spend 3.5 years in safety in this place prepared by God. She will be cared for 1,260 days. So this vision is talking about Israel seeing the abomination and going into hiding, and the devil is tried to destroy Jesus but was unable. Then there was war in heaven. Then, after this vision, or after this time where she flees into the desert, where Israel, the faithful Judeans flee to that safe place, after that, there will be a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels or messengers fought back, but they were not strong enough, and there was no more place for them in heaven. So the great dragon, the ancient serpent called the false accuser, and the adversary, that is to say, Satan and the devil, who misleads the whole inhabited world, was thrown along with his messengers to the earth. So at the midpoint, they are thrown out of heaven. They have had access to heaven all this time. And in the letters of the New Testament, it makes reference to the fact that Satan is our accuser and Jesus is our defender. It's like a court of law before God, where Satan's up there telling him, trying to condemn us all, and Jesus is up there defending. But at this midpoint, they're thrown out. There's a war in heaven, and they lose, and they're thrown out. Okay? And John says, I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now salvation, power, and the kingdom of our God has arrived, as well as the jurisdiction of his anointed, that is to say, the rule of Christ, because the accuser of our sisters and brothers, the one who accused them before God day and night, has been thrown out. They conquered him, the followers of Jesus, by means of the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, even to the point of giving up their lives. On account of this, be happy, all you who live in heaven. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the false accuser has come down to you and is filled with great rage, seeing that his time is short. So the second half is about to begin, and Satan is thrown out of heaven and sent down to the earth along with all his fallen angels. Now, when the dragon, Satan, saw that it had been thrown down to the earth, it pursued the woman that had given birth to the male child. So in other words, he turns his rage against Israel, and this is why Jerusalem is going to be trampled and ransacked. So this is how we tie in a lot of the Old Testament prophecies. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, so that she could fly from the presence of the serpent into the desert to her place to be nourished for a time, times, and half a time. So there's 2 ways that God has referred to, or Jesus is referring to here in Revelation, to that second half: a time, times, and half a time, and 1,260 days, or 42 months for the 2 witnesses. Or no, I'm sorry, 42 months was for the times of the Gentile, the beast ruling. I think I have that right. I could be confused, but anyway, there's 3 different ways to refer to 3.5 years. At any rate, there's a further confirmation that this is the correct interpretation, that these faithful Jews will run to this place and they will be given assistance getting there. What the 2 wings of the great eagle means, some people say, oh, the U.S. Air Force takes them there. I don't think so. I don't know what it means, but that seems unlikely to me at this point, because America will most definitely not be a friend of Israel. It's already not a friend of Israel in many respects, but they certainly aren't going to be caring about airlifting the Jews out of there. So I don't know what it means, but they will have assistance getting to their place of safety. So the serpent shot out from its mouth water like a river, so it would carry her off, but the earth helped the woman and opened up its mouth to swallow the river that the dragon had shot out of its mouth. I mentioned before about Petra. that they had a pretty extensive and ingenious method of routing seasonal monsoons around the area. Even though it's a desert, it would get this once a year. I think it would get this torrential rain that threatened to flood the place because it's in a valley. It's down in the rock. So they made a way to take care of that. But I think this is going to be stepped up a notch here. The earth helps the women and swallows the river. The dragon then went off in a rage and prepared to do battle with the rest of her offspring, who guard the injunction of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And it stood on the seashore. So now, because he could not destroy the last of the Jews, he's going to go off and turn his rage on the Gentiles who were holding to the testimony of Jesus, who came to faith after the rapture outside of the church age. We're going to see some more things. This is where we're going to get into the mark of the beast and stuff, but there's a little ways to go yet, and we're coming up on 2 hours. So I think I'll save the mark of the beast for next time. I know that might be disappointing, but this is, I think, good enough for now, and we'll see if there's any questions in the chat. Let's see. No, I didn't talk about the mark yet. That will be next time, I think. Like I said, it's been almost 2 hours, and so I'll save that for then because I don't want to rush through it. But I will say, yes, that it does say that anyone who takes the mark is doomed. They cannot be saved once they take the mark. And I can speculate that it may involve, taking the mark may involve some kind of DNA change, marketed as a upgrade of some sort, transhumanism, and this is why they can never be saved, because salvation is for humans. Let's see. The Gentiles as sea and the Jews as land has to do with parts of the temple. I don't know about that. All I know is that throughout Scripture, the land almost always refers to the land of Israel. That's all I know. The seven thunders, we don't know. Nobody knows. They can speculate, but the Bible doesn't tell us. And there's a lot it doesn't tell us. It just tells us there's things we don't know. Maybe that's just to keep us from getting, thinking we know it all. I don't know. But I think I will, like I said, I think I will stop today there. And does anyone else have any questions? I'll probably shut it down unless you want to ask me anything else in the chat, all 10 of you or whatever it says. Let me look quick to see if there was anything else I wanted to go over in here. I guess I could look at this part since I did go into the... What I did here was I was trying to line up Jesus' statements with what we're doing here in Revelation. And we haven't got... It kind of overlaps a little bit as far as when he says things, but in that private discourse to his disciples. But he starts getting into... If you look, a lot of people get almost everything they believe about the end times from, if they don't get it from Revelation, they get it from Matthew 24. So you might want to look at that and see how this lines up with Revelation. And this page, let me give you the page. I'll put that, even though the whole book link is in the description, I'll put that here in the chat. So if you want to see that page, you can, and go through those scriptures. What Jesus calls the beginning of birth pangs, and birth pangs at the beginning are fairly mild and not close together. That's the thing about birth pains, is as they go along, they get stronger and more often, more frequent. So Jesus comparing these signs to that kind of a process where they start out mild and far between, and then both the duration between that shrinks and the intensity gets stronger as it goes along. And so in Matthew 24 especially, it seems to line up mostly with the sealed judgments. And then when he talks about the 7-year treaty and things, we're starting to get into the trumpet judgments here, and there's the reference in Daniel and Matthew. And then along in here in these in the list items, you can see the Revelation equivalents of those. So this is how I'm matching up Old Testament, Gospels, and Revelation. So we haven't got to the abomination yet, so I'm going to stop there in that page. I'm trying to see quickly if I have anything else that I might have overlooked or forgotten about. Let me just look through here quick. I think I explained all of that. So here's something I might go over. The biggest question these two witnesses raise is why here and now? Why are they mentioned? Why are they not mentioned at the beginning of Revelation, or at least chapter 4, where or 5, where the scene is changed, after the 7 letters to the churches? Why are these two duration-specified events only brought up as part of the 6th trumpet? A clue might be that it was only at the 5th trumpet that the abyss was open, and immediately after the two witnesses are mentioned, we are told that the beast ascending from the abyss kills them. And since the beast is presumed by many to be the now Satan-possessed world leader who signed the treaty 3.5 years ago, then the midpoint of the 70th week, when the beast declares himself God, is shortly after the two witnesses are killed. So, and the fact that people give themselves, exchange gifts means the world can't be so totally burned out that there's nothing left to give. There's got to be some kind of normalcy going on, even at that midpoint of the tribulation. This is why I don't think it's happening at the end. Some people will say that because the two witnesses are only mentioned at the 7th trumpet, that they're just going to start their 3.5-year ministry at that time and be killed at the end. But at the end, after all the bowl judgments and everything, and Jesus is about to return, people are not going to be sending each other gifts. They're just not. I have a really hard time believing that. So this is why I think that even though they're not mentioned till this point, that they're had to have been active for 3.5 years, which is the first half of the Revelation, or the tribulation. Let's see, we did the third woe. We looked at the temple, the woman and the dragon. You can look at the, that link is in the description. You can look at the commentary I'm looking at here and read more of the details if you want. So then, like I said, next time we'll look at the first and second beast. The second beast is also called the false prophet, and who these might be or who they represent. And I think I will just stop there. I don't think anyone has a question that I see in the chat or anything. All right, it seems like there should be a gazillion questions, but it may just be one of those things where you don't think of a lot of them until you read it yourselves. In which case, maybe when we're all done with Revelation, we can have kind of an open Q&A if anybody's interested. So I think I'm going to stop here, unless there's any objections. Anything anybody on the panel have to say?
No, it's all good. It's all good, Paul.
All right, where you been? I know you said you had company there or something, right?
Yeah. My little one got here, so she's actually drawing the ocean for me with the shark on the whiteboard right now.
Awesome.
Yeah. So,
okay.
Yeah. It wasn't the questions that were out there. There was a couple of them, and you actually got to them and kept it up and kept going. Answered them, and I think it'd be good after Revelation to have a Q&A session with open chat. Of course, sometimes it gets a little hostile when you do that. It
right.
would be good to do that though, and maybe everybody will have some questions, at that time. I think most everyone, for myself, just kind of sitting back and listening and kind of absorbing and maybe putting it to today's standard, because obviously it's from very old text, and when you apply it to what's going on today, you can look around and say, oh, all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, all right, well, you know, and certain things go off. And I think that's very important. So I think that's more of what's happening. Not that nobody has any questions. I think they're trying to apply the two and come up with you know, what's happening right now, as it's, you know, been foretold for some time.
Right. That's why I opened with that news story about Syria, because that article that I mentioned is saying how, and that one and a lot of them are saying how they believe that Syria will be the flashpoint of World War III. And it ties it right in with the prophecies. So yeah, I think it's probably not much of an accident that for some reason that popped into my head that I should go through Revelation like this now. So,
well, and which brings a question actually for myself. Was Syria in the same place as it is now when the text was written?
yeah, Damascus is said to be the oldest inhabited city in the world. It hasn't moved. There's been no other place called Damascus that the Bible ever mentioned, and there's rivers mentioned, and their proximity to Israel, and we know where Israel is. We know where the Mediterranean Sea is. It's always been there. We know where the Dead Sea is. So we've got some topography to look at that tells us where these things are.
Good.
So, yeah, sorry, I thought I got it out to everybody that we had moved this to Friday because conflicts on Saturday night, and tried to give, if you're subscribed, you should have gotten a notice. I don't know, did anybody get one? Any of you who are subscribed to my channel, did you get a notice of when this hangout would be? I know it didn't show up on my channel for some reason. It's supposed to show up. I don't know exactly when. Did anybody see it?
Nope, not me.
Well,
No, I didn't see it. I don't get the notices like that. I know April does. She's not here at the moment. I'll have to ask her if she got the notice. I know that I had checked earlier on your channel, even myself, and I didn't see it. And as we discussed earlier, before you went on air, for some reason, changed. You know, the way. Obviously, YouTube's doing changes all the time, or Google, whatever you want to call it. And
right.
Maybe they changed something, perhaps, in that department. But I didn't see anything like predetermined, no.
I don't know why that is, because I've seen other channels have their hangouts that were scheduled for later. You could go to their channel and it would say, you know, set reminder, you know, if you wanted to get a reminder given. I don't know why it's not doing that for mine. If there's something I got to set, I don't know.
Actually, Paul, if you see out there, Vic said the same thing. She didn't see it either, and she's sub, as I am, as we all are sub to each other and stuff. And Vic is saying she didn't see it either, or get a notice.
I don't know. Just a reminder also that when you subscribe to somebody, you have to also click that little gear, or I think they've changed the symbol maybe to a bell or something now. It's right by the subscribe button. And you have to click a box, you know, you click that and a box pops up. You have to click that to say, send me notifications. If you haven't done that, you won't get them. So make sure you've done that. And I suppose I should say when the next one will be. I'm guessing Tuesday, if there's no, you know, maybe try to do it Tuesday, Friday. Unless Friday turns out to be bad, in which case it'll be other days. I don't know. I just try. As soon as I know when it's going to be, I'll set it up and give people a couple days notice. That's the best I can do right now, I think.
Yeah, actually, in the it might even help as an alternative. Just saying maybe in the comments of this one, when you're going live next time, maybe in the comments of this one, add it to the comments and say, oh, by the way, the next one will be,
okay,
you know, so and so. So if anybody reads the comments as they're watching, because a lot of times, you know, at the time to watch it live, they'll go and read some of the comments as it, you know, as the voice is going on and the audio is going, and look down at some of the comments and read some. Might be a good idea, maybe to put it down there as a backup, so people would know.
Right. Yeah. Remind me when I do the next one. You got to put that in your comment. There is a
Yeah.
question about the part 2 that I mentioned, that Satan likes to behead. I mean, that I get that from Revelation, where it seems like that there are the people under the altar in heaven who were beheaded for their testimony. A lot of people draw a connection between that and Islam, but maybe I think it's that Islam gets it from Satan. You know, that they get that from Satan, that Satan likes to do that. It's apparent from the text that he seems to enjoy. I guess that's about the most easily guaranteed way someone is dead. If you separate head from body, there's no coming back, no reviving, no nothing. You know, if the body isn't, you can lose an arm and a leg, but you can't lose your head. So there's mention about the U.S. has many guillotines. Yeah. Well, as we know from at least Islam, they don't even bother with a guillotine. They like to make it slow and as gory and painful as possible. But who knows? I mean, there may be so many people that they don't have time for the slow, gory way. They have to do the old French way with the guillotines or guillotine. Sorry, Stefan, for butchering that. But also mentioned that Christ is the head and we are the body. Yes, and I think I mentioned in a hangout that they are interdependent. The head supplies nourishment to the body by eating, and the body supports the head. So they one can't live without the other. And maybe there's something symbolic about beheading that, in that regard, that they want to cut the head and body apart, the Christ from his church or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, that's exactly what is, yeah, in the comments there. It's another one of my sisters. Separating body from head.
Good.
Yep. I got to, when you don't have a popular channel, you start getting recruiting your family, right?
Well, that's good. That's actually good.
Yep. So, yeah, it's like Jesus said, they're talking about the head. It's why we need Jesus. Yeah, Jesus said, I am the vine, you're the branches. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So being connected is a big deal, and that's what the gospel is all about. You want to belong to him before any of this happens so that you can escape. So, anything else? Nope, you don't want to be here for the wrath. I think as we, by the trumpet judgments especially, it should be pretty clear that nobody wants to be here. I mean, you notice that one part where it said every island and mountain is shifted from its place? Well, a lot of people think they're just going to hide out on an island or a mountain and escape everything. But they're all going to be shifted. No matter where you are, anywhere on the earth, you're going to be moved, and it's going to be scary. And all your stash and your hideout and your bug out things are going to be probably ruined. So there you go. And that's fairly early in the judgments. So. All right. Anything else? Anybody? Okay. Well, I guess we'll call it a day, and we'll get into. Let me refresh my memory again. We're next time, whenever that is. I'm guessing Tuesday at 8. We'll always try to do it at 8 o'clock. It's just the days. Try to do it twice a week. So hopefully Tuesday, and we'll look at the first and second beasts. We see the 144,000 again, and Babylon, and then the bowl judgments. So we'll see how far we get next time. Okay.
Okay. Well, good as always, Paula.
All right.
Appreciate you having me here.
Thank you. Thanks, panel members. Thanks, everybody in the chat. Come back next time, and I will try to do a better job. And like I said, if you've subscribed, make sure you've checked the little button next to it, and then the pop-up box that tells you to get notifications. And otherwise, I do try to post at Facebook when it's about to go live, like a half hour before, like I did today. That's all I got.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See you all next time.
All righty.